Pain woke me before the light did. A deep, burning ache ran from my knee to my ankle, sharp enough that for a moment I could not remember where I was or how I had gotten there. The air smelled like wet metal and crushed leaves, and somewhere far off, something called out in a low tone that did not belong to any bird I knew. When I tried to sit up, the ground seemed to tilt, as if I had been spinning for hours. My eyes finally focused on a sky the color of rust, 2 pale moons hanging low over a tree line unlike anything I had ever seen on any world I had visited before. A thin metal band sat locked around my wrist, blinking a soft red light every few seconds. Nobody had to explain what that meant. I was being tracked. Beyond the tree line, just visible through a gap in the canopy, a faint wall of pale light stretched across the horizon, the kind of barrier built to keep something contained rather than to keep something out. Wherever I had landed, this was not open wilderness. It was a cage made to look like one, and somewhere inside it, 3 hunters were already closing in to claim me as the newest trophy in a game I had never agreed to play. Pieces of memory came back slowly, out of order, the way they do after something sudden rearranges your senses. The transport shaking apart around us, Grace screaming my name over the alarms, telling me to move before something fast, and Silver tore straight through the hull. Then nothing but static, and now this, alone in the dirt with my leg wrapped in a strip of torn sleeve, and somewhere behind me, branches snapping under slow, deliberate footsteps. I had heard about the Threll long before I ever laid eyes on one. Traders called them collectors. Pilots called them something far less polite. They did not hunt for food or for territory. They hunted for entertainment, broadcasting every chase back to their own people as a kind of spectacle, and they always gave their prey just enough hope to make the show worth watching. A wounded creature that still tried to run was worth more to them than one that simply lay down and waited. Hope, to them, was part of the performance, and the longer the chase, the better the story they could carry home. Most prey never adapted fast enough to change the outcome. They ran in straight lines, exhausted themselves within the first hour, and ended up mounted somewhere as proof of a successful season. I had no intention of becoming a wall decoration in some hunter's trophy hall. I tested the leg slowly, gritting through the pain. It held my weight, barely, but covering any real distance on it was out of the question. Somewhere out there, at least 3 hunters were already moving toward my position, each one faster, stronger, and better equipped than I was. Every instinct screamed at me to crawl into the brush and wait until the pain dulled enough to think clearly. But hiding had never solved a single problem in my line of work. I had spent years guiding recovery teams through collapsed tunnels and storm-wrecked coastlines long before I ever wore a uniform, and every one of those years had taught me the same lesson, over and over. Terrain does not care how big you are or how fast you can run. It only rewards whoever understands it first. So I made a decision that I am fairly certain no Threll hunter had ever prepared for. I stopped thinking like prey. I checked what I had left. A short blade, still strapped to my boot, missed during whatever search had stripped away the rest of my gear. A length of cable from the wreckage, looped twice over one shoulder. A torn strip of reflective hull plating that might be useful later for signaling. No working weapon, no radio, nothing but a clear head and a leg that would carry me maybe half a mile before giving out completely. It would have to be enough, because nobody was coming to hand me a better option. For a moment, the pain in my leg pulled hard enough that the edges of my vision blurred, and I had to press my palm flat against the dirt just to keep from going under completely. I thought about every drill I had ever run through collapsed wreckage with far less reason to keep moving than I had right now. Quitting had never been part of the training, and it was not about to start on a planet I could not even name. The footsteps behind me grew steadily closer, slow and unhurried, moving the way something moves when it already believes the outcome is settled. I dragged myself toward a ridge above a narrow ravine, leaving an obvious trail along the easiest path down. Anyone tracking an injured target follows the path of least resistance, and I needed this one to take it without hesitation. At the edge of the ravine, I strung the cable low between 2 trees and packed loose stone above it, then forced myself further along the ridge and pulled into the shadow of a rock outcrop, every breath sharp with effort, my pulse loud enough that I was certain it could be heard from the trees. The first hunter appeared exactly where I expected, tall and gray-skinned, moving with the kind of easy confidence that comes from doing this many times before. He spotted my trail and broke into a run without slowing to check his footing. The cable caught him at the ankle. He went down hard, and the loose stone above the ravine gave way beneath him, sending him tumbling into the gap below, where he came to rest hard against the rocks, stunned and motionless. I did not celebrate. There was no time for that. I climbed down just far enough to take the tracking unit from his wrist and a short energy blade from his belt, then pulled back into cover before the others could close the distance. It took less than 10 minutes for the second hunter to notice that his companion had gone quiet. I watched from a distance as a leaner figure moved into view, far more cautious than the first, scanning the ravine with a handheld device before calling out something sharp toward the tree line. He was not going to walk into an obvious trap a second time, so I made certain not to offer him the same one. Further down the slope, a stretch of soft, wet ground looked solid until weight was added to it. I dragged a fallen branch across the surface to disguise the danger, circled wide through the brush, and let myself be seen at the tree line just long enough to be noticed, before slipping back out of sight. My pulse hammered the whole time, because one wrong step of my own on that same patch of ground would have ended the plan before it ever started. He took the opening fast, moving in low and confident, certain the numbers favored him now. The instant his foot landed on the soft ground, it gave way beneath him, pulling him down to the waist before he understood what was happening. He thrashed and called out, and that was when I came in from the side, using the energy blade to disable the weapon slung across his back before he could free a hand to reach it. I left him there, stuck and furious, very much alive. A captured hunter tells a far better story than a fallen one, and right then, I needed the rest of his team to start doubting every part of their plan. By the time the third hunter found his companion trapped in the mud, the whole hunting party understood that something had changed. I could hear it in the way their voices shifted, sharper now, far less certain than before. They had come expecting an animal that would run until it finally dropped from exhaustion. Instead, 2 of their best trackers were down, and the only sign of me left behind was a trail that no longer matched any pattern they could predict. I used that confusion while it lasted. I doubled back toward the wreck of an old supply pod buried near the ridge, its hull cracked open and the wiring inside still sparking faintly with stored charge. I exposed a section of live cabling near the entrance, just enough that anyone moving through quickly would complete the circuit, then made enough noise nearby to draw the third hunter in. For a few long seconds his scanner swept directly across the rock I was pressed against, close enough that I could hear it whine as it searched, and I held perfectly still until it moved on. He was younger and far more reckless than the others, eager to prove himself after watching 2 companions fail before him. He charged through the entrance the moment he caught sight of me ducking inside, and the instant his foot crossed the exposed wiring, the charge dropped him instantly, his weapon clattering uselessly against the metal floor. My leg buckled as I moved past him, the pain finally catching up with everything I had pushed it through. But I forced myself forward anyway, taking his rifle and the last working tracker on the team before he could recover. That left only the huntmaster, and somewhere deep down, I had known from the start that he would be the one who truly mattered. I felt him before I saw him, a presence that moved differently from the others, slower, heavier, completely unhurried, the way something moves when it has never once doubted its own place at the top of every hunt it has ever joined. Small drones drifted in behind him, lenses turning to follow every step, broadcasting whatever came next to an audience I would never see. When he finally stepped into the open at the top of the ridge, I understood exactly why the rest of his team had followed him without question. He was built for surviving worse than this planet had to offer, armored, armed, and clearly amused that his prey was somehow still standing, after everything sent against it. For the first time since waking up in that dirt, I felt something close to fear, not of losing, but of how much further I would have to push myself to make sure I did not. He spoke first, in slow, broken words pulled from some translator device strapped to his collar, telling me the hunt was over, that I had fought well for an injured animal, and that it was time to finish things properly. I did not answer with words. I answered by stepping backward, toward the cliff edge behind me, the one spot on this entire ridge I had spent the last hour preparing without him knowing it existed. He came at me fast, faster than I expected from something his size, the ground shaking slightly with every stride he closed between us, and the only reason I am able to tell this story now is that speed was never the part of the plan I was relying on. I let him close the distance, let him believe the chase was finally ending exactly the way he wanted it to, and at the last possible second, I dropped flat into the shallow trench dug along the ridgeline, hidden under a thin layer of loose branches. His own momentum carried him past me, straight toward the cliff edge, and the rifle taken from the third hunter was already in my hands, firing a single disabling charge into the stabilizer pack mounted on his back the instant he tried to catch his balance. It was enough. He went over the edge, caught by the emergency netting his own people had rigged below for exactly this kind of fall, alive, furious, and thoroughly humiliated in front of every drone that had been broadcasting the entire event back home. I stood at the edge for a long moment, breathing hard, my leg finally giving out beneath me as the adrenaline that had carried me this far began to fade. Below, the huntmaster struggled against the netting, shouting orders that nobody remained to follow. Every tracker on this ridge belonged to me now, every weapon, every device still streaming footage back to wherever the Thrall watched their entertainment unfold. I thought of Grace, and whoever else from the crew might still be scattered through this engineered wilderness, waiting for someone to believe that escape was still possible. I picked up the last working comm unit from the Huntmaster's own belt, switched it over to the open channel, and said the only thing that felt worth saying to whoever was still listening on the other end. I told them the hunt was finished, and that whoever was watching should remember this moment the next time they decided an injured human made for an easy trophy. Then I sat down against the rock, pressed a hand firmly against the wound to slow the bleeding, and waited for the rescue beacon I had triggered from the Huntmaster's own equipment to bring my people home. Somewhere above the tree line, I caught the faint glow of approaching engines, drawn by the same signal I had sent out into the dark. The forest around me had gone completely silent by then, the kind of silence that only settles once every predator in it has finally understood exactly who the real hunter had been all along. When the rescue shuttle finally broke through the canopy, its lights sweeping low across the ridge, I learned that the broadcast had never once cut away during the entire chase. Every Threll household tuned into that network had watched an injured, unarmed target take apart an entire hunting party using nothing but the ground beneath his feet. The footage would circulate for seasons to come, not as a celebration, but as a warning passed quietly from one hunter to the next. Grace was pulled from a ravine 3 miles east less than an hour later, bruised but steady on her feet, and when she asked how I had turned an entire hunt around with one bad leg and no real weapon, all I could tell her was that I had simply stopped running. My name is Caleb Hart, and after that day, the Threll never hunted an injured human again.